We begin this morning's program as all such gatherings ought to begin. I now call upon the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 965, Commander Dean Henderson, to present the colors. Honor Guard Commander, present the colors.
Honor Guard, attention, hut.
If you are able to stand, please stand and remain standing for the duration of the national anthem.
Port arms. Forward. At a half step, march. Honor Guard, halt, left, haste. Honor Guard, prepare to post. Post.
I now call upon Vietnam veteran Wayne Miller to sing the national anthem.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Sergeant Miller, for that wonderful rendition of the national anthem. I now call upon Deacon Sherman Knapp, Vietnam veteran and Gilchrist volunteer, to open up our program with an invocation.
Let us bow our heads in prayer. Almighty God, creator and sustainer of life, we ask that your blessings be upon us today and descend on us as we gather here. We thank you for this opportunity to once more in freedom assemble to honor and the Vietnam veterans of our nation's armed forces. May we never forget those who made the supreme sacrifice as to secure our nation the blessings of life, liberty, and justice for all. We who are veterans of the Vietnam War often think of our brothers and sisters whose names are engraved upon the black granite, the wall, in our nation's capital, whom we will never forget and will always honor with respect. May our observance be a timely reminder that our freedom was purchased at a high cost and should not be taken for granted. Bless the families and friends of those who we honor today, and bless the veterans who have come with memories, stories, and tears to enrich this day. Inspire in us, O Lord, to continue to seek peace in a world, peace with compassion, and peace with justice. May we be ready to serve others and to serve you even as we have served our nation. We pray for our families and friends who were left to their loss, and we ask that they may be comforted with the knowledge of our support and our tears. And we pledge to them through you that their sacrifices will be remembered, and that to honor them, we will work diligently for peace so that our children may know a world without war. Amen.
Thank you, Deacon Knapp. And now, Honor Guard Commander, retire the colors.
Right face. Forward, march.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to honor the men and women who served during the Vietnam War. The remaining U.S. combat troops left Vietnam and returned from a war that spanned almost 20 years. We are here today on behalf of a grateful nation, a grateful state, and a grateful community to thank all veterans who served during the Vietnam War and to give them a joyous welcome home celebration. This year, we are gathering virtually to carry on the tradition. We now share this program nationwide in the hopes that many of the 600,000 still living Vietnam veterans and their families can join us in heart and in spirit. As a Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Army, I am humbled and grateful that you have joined us to honor your fellow service members. Many of you came before us and helped pave the way, and some of you came after us, carrying on the tradition of defending freedom. We thank you. This is our opportunity to salute each of you from every branch of service to our great country. Freedom is defined by our Constitution more than 200 years ago and defended by all of us. Together, we make the finest force the world has ever known. If there is a gift during this pandemic, we hope that this celebration of service reaches so many more Vietnam veterans in our state and across the country. Here to provide the official welcome from Gilchrist is its president, Kathy Hamill, herself a daughter of a World War II Army veteran. We are grateful for Kathy's leadership, unwavering support, and passion in making the We Honor Veterans Initiative a top priority at Gilchrist. Kathy?
Thank you, John. We are honored to have Lieutenant Colonel John Ratliff as the host of today's program. It is fitting that I join you today from the Maryland Military Museum. The museum honors and celebrates the military accomplishments of all Marylanders. I am privileged to be here today to share with our viewers that Gilchrist's commitment to veterans extends far beyond one day each year. Our We Honor Veterans program builds upon a movement by the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization and the Department of Veterans Affairs. This program is dedicated to meeting the unique needs of veterans at the end of life and honoring them for their service. At Gilchrist, staff and volunteers provide compassionate care each and every day to hundreds of veterans who are seriously ill. And over the years, we have honored thousands more through salute to service ceremonies. The salute to service is a simple but powerful ceremony that is conducted for a dying veteran in our care. The final salute is the ultimate military gesture to show respect and honor from one service member to another. When we honor them with this salute, many veterans are overcome with emotion. Others are beaming with pride. We couldn't provide today's event without the wonderful work of our staff, volunteers, and the individuals on our Veterans Task Force who came together to make today's event possible. This would normally be an in-person event, but like many events, our event will be virtual this year. Our hope is to send this video nationally so that we can honor not only veterans in Maryland, but throughout the country. I would also like to thank Maryland's Governor Hogan for signing into law and making March 30th an opportunity for us to officially recognize the contributions of our Vietnam veterans. I would also like to thank our government officials, special dignitaries, fellow speakers, our sponsors, our Gilchrist and GBMC leadership staff and volunteers who joined forces to bring this program to all of you today. Please know that we don't do this because we have to. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And we believe deeply that veterans should be honored for their service and their sacrifice to our country. And it is for this reason that Gilchrist is more committed than ever to holding this special program not only for Vietnam veterans in Maryland, but for those all over this great nation. We know that doing this has had a tremendous impact on others in the past because they have shared with us how meaningful this event has been for them. I hope today's program is as meaningful to you as it has been to the hundreds of veterans that we have had the privilege to welcome home, many for the very first time. As an organization dedicated to taking care of people with serious illness, Gilchrist is dedicated to taking care of veterans who now represent 1 in 5 dying Americans. Our call to action today is for you to get involved. We want you involved in the We Honor Veterans program with us to ensure that every veteran feels honored, cared for, and celebrated for their service. Thank you so much for being with us today. It truly is an honor for us to pay tribute to all veterans. As my Army veteran father used to say, we can't change the past, but we can try to right the wrong. We need to do what we should have done years ago. To all of you here, veterans, active military, family members, caregivers, and everyone else watching, on behalf of Gilchrist, thank you for your service and your sacrifice.
Thank you, Kathy, for all that you and your team does throughout the year to enhance the lives of our veterans. I'm delighted to next introduce Kimberly Mitchell, who has dedicated her life to service. She was the former president and chief executive officer of the Veterans Village in San Diego, a nationally recognized leader in serving homeless military veterans, providing treatment programs for more than 2,000 veterans every year. She is a strong advocate for Vietnam veterans and was a part of the Department of Defense's commemoration team, dedicated to honoring and thanking Vietnam veterans across the country. Ms. Mitchell attended the United States Naval Academy and served in the United States Navy for 17 years as a surface warfare officer. The story that you are about to see is a miracle, proving that when one person takes the time to care, good can emerge from almost any circumstance. Meet Kim Mitchell.
I was always told by my adoptive parents that I was adopted from the orphanage in Da Nang, that they had no idea how I got there. The nuns did not know how I got there. So as far as I was concerned, for the first 40 years of my life, my story started at the orphanage in Da Nang, the Sacred Heart Orphanage. Of course, during that time, adopting a little Vietnamese child from a war that people didn't really support at that time was not really the popular thing to do. But they did so, and I'm glad that my father went over one day to bring clothes and bring over supplies to the orphanage, take care of the children. And one day they placed baby number 899 in his arms, and he fell in love. When I was in 3rd grade, my father decided that I would be going to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and that's what he started talking about, was Air Force, Air Force, Air Force. So I grew up thinking I was going to go to the Air Force Academy. In fact, I started getting catalogs, pamphlets, colored brochures, and everyone was smiling and having a great time at the U.S. Naval Academy here in Annapolis. And I decided at that moment that I was going to switch my goal from the Air Force Academy to the Naval Academy. The core values of the United States Navy that were instilled in us, of honor, courage, and commitment, and that sense of leadership, and that sense of service. It's the bond of service that binds those that served in Vietnam together. It is bonds that will never be broken by anything. This is where it all started for me. So it was the year 2011, and that was the year that I turned 40 years old. And some friends and I decided that we were gonna go on a trip together. And we decided that we were going to go back to Vietnam to celebrate Kim's 40th birthday. And I would say that it wasn't until we went up into Da Nang that feelings started to come over me. And it was the feeling like, wow, this is the city that it all first started. This was the city that the orphanage was in. And it wasn't until later on that day when we were getting into the cab that my friend said, before we hit the market, we've got a little surprise for you. And I said, well, what's the surprise? And they said, well, we think we've contacted the nuns that worked at the orphanage, and we've set up a meeting for you to meet them. So we're going to head there first before we head to the market. Because my head turned so fast, I said, what are you talking about? So we drove a couple miles and pulled up to this corner, and there's two little nuns, and I'm going to call them little because I'm 5'2", and these ladies were under 5 feet. And we got out of the cab, and they said, Kimberly? And I said, yes. And they said, welcome home. And I was like, what is happening, right? I mean, it was just all of a sudden, I was like, what's going on? And they brought us in, and for the next 2 hours, they told me how they took care of the children at the orphanage. They took everyone from infants to toddlers. And they asked me, they said, do you remember what your Vietnamese name was before you came over to the States? And I said, I do, because I said, I remember what was in my Vietnamese passport. And they asked me to write it down. They said, well, first we can tell that you're American because you completely wrote the words in the wrong order. But we can tell by what you wrote down what your name is. And they said, this is what your name is. Tran T Ngoc Bic. Tran was your last name, T was your middle name, and Ngoc Bic was your first name. And they said, that means precious pearl. And I said, wow. And so one of the nuns asked the other nun to go get something. And I think I was still kind of overwhelmed of even sitting at the same table as these women. And what they explained to me was that in 1975, when the communist government came in and took over, they made them burn all their records. And the nuns knew that that was going to happen. So they memorized the names of all the children, about 2,000 children. And so they said, what we have here are the books that we rewrote with the names of the children. And they said, let's find your name. And again, I'm still stunned that this is even happening. And I was like, okay, thinking this is not happening. I don't even know why I'm here. And we started looking through the books, and the first book we didn't find anything. Second book we didn't find anything. And midway through the third book, we found baby number 899, Tran T Ngoc Bic. For me, it was an absolute yes, that was me, that I was there. Even though I had pictures of that my father had taken at the orphanage of holding a little baby, I was like, oh yeah, that's me. But to see my name in the book that they had, and it matched the name that I had in my passport. And so the U.S. Embassy did a press release on my visit, and it had my name in it, and it had that I was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, and that I was at the Pentagon, that I had been back to Vietnam, and my name of Tran T Ngoc Bic. We found out later that it was published here in the United States in a magazine that's primarily printed for the Vietnamese community here in the United States. And in October of 2012, I was contacted by a gentleman that lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And actually it was through a friend of his who actually speaks a little English. And her message to me was, I know how you got to the orphanage in Da Nang, call me. Me being slightly skeptical, it's like, this is impossible. This scam artist probably wants $5,000. Nope, delete. So I deleted the message. The messages kept coming in via email, and they kept calling my cell phone, kept deleting. Finally, one day I answered the phone, and it was this lady, and she said, please don't hang up. She's like, I know how you got to the orphanage in Vietnam. And I said, oh, how do you know? She said, because my friend Bao Tran is the one who brought you to the orphanage. and gave you the name Tran T. Knockbeck. And so she said, in 20 minutes, we're gonna call you, because I'm headed to his house right now, and he's gonna tell you the story. And so they called me, and what he explained to me was that in 1972, when the North Vietnamese were advancing into Quang Tri, he and his South Vietnamese Marine Company were assigned to evacuate the village. One last survivor stumbled across the bridge. This gentleman was carrying a bundle, and in the bundle it was a baby wrapped up in a towel and placed in a hat. And when they asked him if this was his baby, he said, no. He said, I found the baby lying alongside the road. Her mother had been killed and she was trying to nurse on her dead mother. He said, but I can't take her any further, so you take her to the orphanage. And so this South Vietnamese Marine took it upon himself, took the company jeep, and presented the child to the nuns, and they said, well, you brought her here. What's her name? He said, she doesn't have a name. And they said, well, you give her a name. And he said, I'm going to name her what I was going to name my first daughter, which was Knockbeck, Precious Pearl. And so what I decided to do was, after our events in Los Angeles, make a side trip back through Albuquerque on my way back to Washington, D.C. They did send a crew with us. I was contacted by a reporter from the Albuquerque Journal. And he said, I know you're coming into town tomorrow and that you're meeting with Bao Tran on Friday. He said, I've already interviewed Bao Tran and the family. They're very excited about meeting you. And I would love to interview you. He said, because tomorrow your story is going to be on the front page of the Albuquerque Journal. This is a big deal, this meeting. And I'm like, I don't understand why it's a big deal. He said, Kim, do you realize the significance of March 29th? And I'm like, Good Friday? And he said, it's the 40th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. And I said, are you kidding me? Of all the days to meet. And I sent my little scout team to the Vietnamese Community Center that morning. And I was getting text messages back saying, he's in uniform. And I said, what do you mean he's in uniform? Apparently he's wearing the uniform that he was wearing when the last time he saw you. So we went to the community center and there's all these people and he was there and he gave me a big hug. And he said something in Vietnamese, which I found out later, that he said, you've gotten big. But it was a great meeting with Bao Tran and his wife and his daughter, which of course is what ended up on TV, was when I got a little emotional. What Cindy, the daughter, their daughter, says to me is that they were looking for me, he was looking for me for 40 years. She said she remembers the day that he brought the magazine home in May of 2012. She said, I found her, I finally found her. What I learned was that people are willing to go out of their way to do something for someone else. And that one act of kindness can truly change the course of a life. I know that I'm in a very unique position to be able to bridge the gap between generation of Vietnam veterans and the generation of veterans that serve today. I understand that when the Vietnam veterans came back from service, that their service wasn't appreciated. But I also understand that it takes time to heal. And for many of the Vietnam veterans that I have met over the course of the last decade or so, many of them have started that healing process and some still have to get there.
Thank you, Kim. Your story is a testament to the good that our Vietnam veterans did when they served. And now, I am privileged to present a message from the Honorable Larry Hogan.
There can't possibly be words adequate enough to express our gratitude, our respect, and our appreciation to all of you who served. Thank you to each and every one of the 130,000 Marylanders who served during the Vietnam War. And thank you to those Vietnam veterans from all across the nation. All of you and all of our brave military heroes have given more than any of us can ever fully know. That's why the very first piece of legislation that I enacted as governor was a bill to establish March 30th as Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day. On behalf of all the people of our state, we sincerely thank you for your service, and I pledge to you today that as long as I am governor, our Vietnam veterans and our entire veterans community will continue to have a true friend in the governor's office. You will find a sympathetic ear, an open door, and a seat at the table. And I will continue to stand up and fight for each and every one of you who have worn the flag of our nation on your arm. May God bless each and every one of you and your families, and may God continue to bless the great state of Maryland and the United States of America.
So John, tell me how the bill came about.
Well, I'd gotten to know Diane Sancilio. They have a program at the place where she was working for hospice care to honor veterans. And she wanted to do something for Vietnam veterans because we had come home to a community that turned its back on us. I was the only combat veteran in the Senate. So she approached me and said, would you be willing to put in a bill which would designate March 29th as Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day? And I said, absolutely. I introduced the bill, and all of a sudden, every member of the Senate wanted to be on it. And then the House found out we had a Senate bill, and they wanted a bill. And every member of the House got on their bill. And so the bill passed unanimously in both houses of the legislature. And then the governor, he was brand new, it was his first session in office. He signed a bill during the session.
And this is continuous every year?
Yeah.
Wow.
This was good. Everybody wanted it, and it went very well. And the program's been popular. Mm-hmm. Because many of the Vietnam veterans that came home, people turned their back on them. I got spit on in the Los Angeles airport. So that's the kind of reception. And so many of them went back to communities where nobody cared and they couldn't talk about their experiences. But now, with this gathering, they can share the stories with each other. It's been a really good thing.
Absolutely.
You know, I think looking at my past with the Vietnam War and with the other wars that our country's been involved in, Vietnam was different, and it left something in the psyche of America, more so than the other wars have.
I agree. Hi, gentlemen.
Hey, come on in.
May we join you?
Yeah, please, join us. Please.
How are you all?
Good. Talking about when we all got back from Vietnam.
Yeah. So what was it like?
Giving out dates. Vietnam?
No, when you got back.
It wasn't a fun time.
Yeah, I agree.
It was not a fun time. I remember walking into LAX the day I got discharged, and two guys running up and asking me, how many babies did you kill? And for a second I wished I was back in Vietnam. It was a very different time.
That was the worst part. I would say the same thing. They call us baby killers and wanted to, spit on us. It was horrible.
One of the things I think that helped me was I stayed on active duty another 5 years.
Did you?
And so I was working with guys that I'd served with, and we're telling the stories every day, over and over. Same stories. I could tell your stories as well as you could tell.
We all have the same story.
Absolutely. Because only, in my opinion, only a vet knows, the story that you cannot share with someone else, but you can share, like I can share my story with Rick or Mike or Calvin or Virgil, but I could not share it with anyone. I could share it with you, but I couldn't share it with anybody else. Because
it turned out to be a great thing because I had just retired, didn't know what I wanted to do with my time, and for the first time, and you asked a question about service, for the first time in 50 years, I found myself kind of embracing my military service and wanting to share and be with other veterans, where I didn't really have that before. I was working career and given the experience of the 60s, 70s, that was behind me. And now to be able to kind of give back is very important. So I really enjoy that.
And Governor Hogan, it was his first term, and he signed it on the day that it became effective. We had a big ceremony. We marched from here down to the local hotel, and we had the very first gathering of Vietnam veterans. It was very emotional.
And it should have been.
Yeah.
You know.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
So I'm
Really.
proud to have been able to do that.
Thank you so much.
We lost 1,017 Marylanders who gave their ultimate sacrifice, and it's the very least we can do is honor them every year on March 30th as Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day. We should remember them every day, but at least one day to memorialize that.
And so coming to events like this, it releases, it's kind of a weight off of your shoulders. The 17 guys that I lost, for a number of years, I just kept those guys in my heart and in my head, but I still remember the names of each of those 17 guys. And they were outstanding, heroic kind of guys who no telling what they could have been or would have contributed to this society had they not died.
Today, a candle will be lit in their memory. The Honorable Clarence Tiger Davis, Baltimore Vietnam War veteran, former delegate of the Maryland General Assembly, and commander of the Buffalo Soldiers, Baltimore District, would you do us the great honor in lighting the candle? At this time, we will be conducting 3 salutes. The first salute is a solemn recognition of every Vietnam veteran who has joined us for our program here today. Command Sergeant Major Michael E. Benkendorf of Fort Meade will lead his soldiers and other active duty military, the Marines from the Marine Barracks, the midshipmen of the United States Naval Academy, ROTC cadets of Loyola and Towson University in these 3 salutes. Command Sergeant Major Benkendorf.
Thank you. 2 words that seem so simple but are so powerful. Today, we'll work alongside the community and organizations like Gilchrist to ensure your service to our nation is recognized and that you receive the welcome home you deserve. On behalf of all the service members stationed at Fort George G. Meade, Maryland, we wanted to take this time to recognize all the soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen that served this great nation during the Vietnam War. Thank you for your service. Present, loud.
Thank you, Command Sergeant Major Benkendorf. The second salute is a tribute to those veterans who are no longer with us. I invite each of you during the second salute to say all together, and either out loud or to yourself, the name or names of any deceased Vietnam veterans you have known. For these salutes, I invite all Vietnam veterans who are able to stand to do so. The third salute is the missing man table, which is to the right of me. This special table is reserved to honor the prisoners of war and those Vietnam veterans missing in action who never returned home. Set for one, this empty chair represents Americans who were or are missing from each of the services, and civilians, all with us in spirit. The table, It is round, to show our everlasting concern. The cloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their motives when answering the call to serve. The single red rose reminds us of the lives of those Americans and their loved ones and friends who keep the faith while seeking answers. The yellow ribbon symbolizes our continued uncertainty and hope for their return and determination to account for them all. A slice of lemon, it reminds us of their bitter fate, captured and missing in a foreign land. A pinch of salt symbolizes the tears of our missing and their families who long for answers after decades of uncertainty. The lighted candle, it reflects our hope for their return, alive or dead. A spiritual book represents the strength gained through faith for many to sustain us and those lost from our country, founded as one nation under God. The glass is inverted to symbolize their inability to share a toast. The chair is empty. They are missing.
Right, left, 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 left. Mark time, march, group, halt, precinct, hunt. Order, hunt.
Even if you have not had the chance to visit it, we all know about the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It was created to pay tribute to the brave men and women of the U.S. Armed Forces who were killed or missing in action during the Vietnam War. It is better known as simply the Wall in Washington, D.C. An elegant and seemingly endless piece of polished black granite, it has the names of over 58,000 American service members who gave the ultimate sacrifice during the war.
There is a sacredness in tears. They are not a mark of weakness, but of power. They speak more eloquently than 10,000 tongues. They are the messengers of overwhelming grief, of deep contrition, and of unspeakable love.
We have an Adrang reunion, a 1st Cav reunion in the Washington area. Early in the morning on Veterans Day or right around Veterans Day, we go to the wall at daybreak. And Joe Galloway and I read the names of our dead aloud, and we have a brief ceremony then, and anyone who wants to attend can attend.
I finally made it to the wall about 5 years after it was dedicated, and for the first time, somebody, a GI marching up the street, he said, "Welcome home, brother." And that was the first time that had ever happened. And I like the experience of being around other Vietnam veterans. It really does mean something.
Getting the memorial made was a whole different kind of a battle. Jan Scruggs was instrumental in making sure the wall was built so that none of those who died would ever be forgotten.
I was a recognized authority on post-traumatic stress disorder. At the time, they didn't really have a name for it. This was in 1976 and 1977. I testified before the Senate and wrote articles for the Washington Post in an academic journal. So I took that body of knowledge and the idea of survivor conflicts and some of the thinking of Carl Jung, who was a student of Sigmund Freud. Came up with the idea that I was going to build a national memorial on the Mall in Washington, D.C. And at the time I was a GS7 at the Department of Labor. The probability of success was very, very low. A different path was waiting for me. for me to take the initial steps and take the risks. Well, there's a connection between the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, days like this when we honor the veterans of the Vietnam War. The purpose of the memorial was to provide honor for those for whom honor had been taken away because of the controversy of the war. So, flowing from the success of the memorial came efforts like Vietnam Veterans Day. So it's all good. It's all a good thing. It's paid for itself in many ways, mostly in terms of personal satisfaction and also a great gift to the nation.
This is the story that needs to be told about these guys. And it is told in this great love story book that's written by Joe Galloway and Hal Moore called We Were Soldiers Once and Young. It's not a war story, it's a love story about what men will sacrifice for each other in times of crisis.
We shook hands on a deal that when he got out of the Army and I got done with wandering around the world, we would start work on the book. I came back from Moscow. I was assigned to Los Angeles. I'm sitting in my living room in a comfortable chair, arguably the safest place I've been in 15 years. And a movie comes on. The next thing I see, the screen is full of a mass assault of Huey helicopters. God, there must have been 100 of them. I'm sitting there shaking like a leaf and crying like a baby. And I thought, okay, either you face this thing or you run from it. And if you run from it, it'll catch you and kill you. So the next morning, I called Hal Moore and I said, are you ready to work on that book? He said, I sure am. I said, I'll be there tomorrow. And we ended up tracking down and interviewing over 250 individuals for the book. We had to find them the old-fashioned way, one phone call at a time, and we got to work. This is Joe Galloway. I'm calling for the family of Don Penny. Is this the right number? I'm doing research on a book, and if your dad is there, I'd like to talk to him about his service in Vietnam. I hate to hear that he's left us before I had a chance to interview him. It took us 10 years before the book came out.
For the first time, American ground forces collided directly and exclusively with North Vietnamese regulars.
Vietnam was the most openly covered war in our history.
They were a tough enemy, but we took them on.
You could get a letter from an editor saying he would run your stuff. You got a press card, and that was your ticket to ride. How I ended up in the Ia Drang is that I had been trying to get in there all day long. Finally, I spotted Hal Moore's operations officer, and I said, Matt, I need to get in there. And he said, well, as soon as it's dark, I'm taking in 2 helicopters full of ammo. I said, can you give me a ride? He said, not without the colonel's permission. And we went into this little tent with the radio. He called up and he got Hal Moore on the radio, and you could hear over the crackling, you could hear the sound of gunfire and artillery in the background. And he explained that he was coming in and bringing a few people, and oh, by the way, that reporter Galloway wants to come in with me. And I was listening real close, and Hal Moore said, "If he's crazy enough to want to come in here and you got room, bring him." The colonel had got a look at me, and he understood that I carried an M16 as well as my cameras. So I had a ride in. Then all I had to do was hide out from the competition. AP, various broadcast units who were all trying to get in. And as it started getting dark, they all got on a Huey and went back to the rear where they could get a hot dinner and a cold bunk. And I got a ride into the pages of history. The helicopters lifted off. We threw all of the cases of ammo and bottles of water off, hit the ground, and the helicopters lifted off. And then there was more or less silence, and certainly it was dark as could be. We heard this voice, and it was Sergeant Major Plumley. He said, "Follow me and I'll take you to the command post. Watch where you step. There's a lot of bodies in this grass, and most of them are ours." It's a pretty cold welcome. I knew where I wanted to be, and I knew I had gotten there, and I had the biggest story in Vietnam, and I had it exclusively. To give you an overview at Landing Zone X-Ray, first of all, you've got to understand Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore was the guy on the ground. He was running this campaign. All of us had some doubts as to whether we would survive, but he had none. He was sure that we not only would survive, we would be victorious. It never a doubt crossed his mind, no matter how bad things got, and they got very bad. We were a understrength battalion of 400 men surrounded by approximately 2,000 North Vietnamese regulars, and they wanted to kill us all. The people that I met there, the stories that I ran across, begin with Hal Moore, but they move on to his right-hand man, Command Sergeant Major Basil L. Plumley, a bear of a man out of West Virginia. But when I really met him was on that first morning when all hell broke loose and there were bullets flying everywhere, and I hit the ground on my belly, trying to feather out at the edges so that nothing stuck up, because everything was coming across about knee-high. And that's right over your head. I was down there thinking about what I'd gotten myself into, and I saw these pair of size 12 combat boots, and I heard this voice over the god-awful noise of battle. "Can't take no pictures laying down there on the ground, Sonny." And I thought, damn, he's right. And like a fool, I got up and followed the sergeant major as he went around the command post, gathering up the odds and sods that he could make into a small reserve force. He wasn't sure we were going to make it. He wanted all of us who didn't have something to do immediately to have our rifles at hand in case we needed to fight off the enemy from the command post and protect the colonel. I know that somewhere in there we all made a decision that probably we were going to die in this place. And you might as well die doing your job the best you could. It had not escaped me that I was now with George Armstrong Custer's old battalion, surrounded by a vastly larger enemy in a river valley, and that sure didn't work very well for Custer. On the second day, things were looking real bad over on the Charlie Company perimeter, and they were parts of it being overrun. Hal Moore knew that. He moved some reinforcements the best he could, but it was very few and far too late. And so he turned to the Air Force liaison and he said, "Hastings, call Broken Arrow." And Broken Arrow was code for an American unit about to be overrun by the enemy. Send every aircraft you have to our support. Every airplane in Vietnam came to our support. They stacked them up from 5,000 feet to 35,000 feet, about every 500 feet or so. There were other people there who are heroes beyond measure. Everybody was doing their job. If anybody failed, we might all die. During this, a pair of F-100 Super Sabres got their instructions wrong and came east to west instead of north to south. And the lead plane punched the button on 2 cans of napalm. And they're coming end over end. And I'm watching them. And they seem to be almost in slow motion. And they're coming right for us. Right for the command post. And they come right over our head and they impact less than 20 yards from us. And there's this blast of fire. But there were 2 or 3 engineer troops that had dug a hole out there. 2 of them are dancing in the fire. They're being burned alive. I just jumped up and ran into the fire and helped pick up one of the most badly burned men and carried him out to the aid station. Jim Nakayama out of Rigby, Utah. His wife had just had a baby girl. He lay in that aid station. The doctor hit him with all the morphine he could, and he was still screaming. So he was in bad shape and in fact died 2 days later. Never got to see his daughter. I have the only Bronze Star with V, a Combat Valor Medal, that the U.S. Army awarded to a civilian during the entire war. I was given that medal for the rescue of Jimmy Nakayama out of the napalm fire and other actions on the battlefield. I wear it in memory of 70 of my friends who paid the ultimate sacrifice in trying to get the real story. Day 3 was one final push. Hal Moore gave orders that we were to push the perimeter out 200 meters over on the former Charlie Company position where there were 2nd of the 7th Cavalry guys under Lieutenant Rescorla. They pushed out, ran into snipers in the trees and a rear guard action, and managed to call bombs down on them and kill them. Hal Moore wanted that perimeter expanded, and he ordered everybody, once they got to 200 meters, to turn around, fall to your hands and knees, and crawl back through the tall grass until we find the 2 missing American bodies. And we did. We found them, we brought them home. Hal Moore was not going to leave that battlefield until he had accounted for all of his men. I flew out like I flew in, with Snake Crandall at the stick, and Hal Moore was in the bird and the sergeant major, and we went by the artillery fire base and thanked the artillery for all of their support. They had fired 22,000 rounds of 105 howitzer artillery in support of us in those 3 days. They literally drew a circle of hot flying metal all around us. On the 18th morning, I managed to fly out there, and it was a horror scene. They were collecting the bodies. 155 Americans had died there in about 6 hours' time. It was a bloodbath. It was a shootout in the tall grass, each side killing the others wounded, nobody taking any prisoners. Nightmare time. Nightmare. Saw them loading the American bodies on a Chinook helicopter, and when they lifted the tailgate, the blood gushed out the back of it. I knew that this was the biggest story of the war so far. I did not know it would remain the bloodiest battle of the entire war. I knew that it was important. I knew that a lot of Americans died between landing zone X-ray and landing zone Albany. 234 American boys killed in action, 500 wounded.
Having commanded this battalion for 18 months, you must excuse my emotion here, but when I see some of these men go out where they have, I can't tell you how highly I feel. They're tremendous.
Unimaginable bloodbath. I don't know how many North Vietnamese we killed. 2,000, 3,000, something like that. I went back to Pleiku, and the general called a press conference. That's General Dick Knowles, at that time a brigadier general. Later he was a 3-star. And he got up and he said, there had been a meeting engagement in the jungle, and we won. And I stood up, and he looked at me, and I said, General, that's total bullshit, and you know it. He was a little upset. And the press conference just blew up.
For the first time, American ground forces collided directly and exclusively with North Vietnamese regulars. No South Vietnamese troops, no Viet Cong guerrillas. In this 3-day battle of Tu Phuong near the Cambodian frontier, the Americans scored a clear victory.
The effects of those 4 days, the number of American casualties, you have to remember at that point only 1,100 Americans had been killed in the whole Vietnam War. And suddenly we're adding 300 plus. And it shocked Washington, it shocked Lyndon Johnson. We can find whatever diplomatic cover we can and get out of Vietnam. Or we give Westmoreland what he's asking for, 200,000 more American troops. In which case, by early 1967, all we can possibly achieve is a military stalemate at a much higher level of violence. There are a certain number of folks who came home from Vietnam with a bad case of survivor's guilt. There's no reason for any Vietnam veteran who survived to feel guilty about surviving. This is a waste of God's good time and your life. Don't do that. The first thing you have to do is forgive yourself. That's the real answer. And until you do that, you're caught in a cycle of misery. And we don't want that for our veterans. They don't deserve that. We need to pull them out of that, to teach them that the only thing they need to have is pride. Pride in the job they did, in the friends they made, in the friends they lost. Took a lot of pictures. George Forrest is one of my heroes, and he was the hardest nut to crack when I was doing interviews for the book. He wouldn't return my phone calls. I finally got him on the phone, and he said, look, I don't want to talk about this, I've put it in a box up in the top of the closet, and I don't want to ever open that box because I'm afraid of what it'll do to me. He said, I have a feeling of great guilt. And I said, whatever for, George? And he said, I lost 17 of my precious men out of one company. I said, George, I said, I know this battle now better than most folks who fought it. And I would tell you that you did a better job than any other company commander in that battle. I said, there are other commanders who lost 80 men. You lost 17. That's the fewest number of casualties of any company in this battle. I said, you should be proud, not guilty. When I finished the chapter which he was in, I sent it to him. And he called me up a few days later. He said, I want to thank you. He said, I want to thank you for giving me my life back. But mostly I want to thank you because I went home this weekend and I gave that chapter to my father. And he read it, and he sat there for a few minutes silent. And finally he looked up and said, you done good, George. He said, I wouldn't trade $1 million for that. If you are a participant and a witness in something as horrendous as that battle, it never leaves you. You're meant to remember all of it and to honor those who fell and didn't get to come home. We made a trip back over there, myself, General Moore, a dozen American veterans of this battle. 5 of us got to spend the night on the battlefield. Hal Moore had been wanting this for 35, 40 years so that he could walk the foxholes and commune with his fallen troops. And we stood there, and a monsoon rain came pouring in to keep the helicopter from coming back to get us. And we stood there in the rain for an hour or so, and then we built a fire. After the sky cleared for an hour, there was a shower of meteors like I've never seen before. It was God's own tracers over our heads. And I think every one of us had the same thought. These are the spirits of every man on both sides who died in this place. And they're telling us, it's okay. You've done all you can do to memorialize us. Let it go.
We sit beneath the night sky, by the whisper of the windsong, in the quiet of darkness, and they are never far. Those we have loved and cherished, those who have changed our lives in some small or profound way, are closer than we know, because it is their light that shines on our world. It is the brilliance of their souls that makes our night sky glow.
And you know what I found was their spirits didn't weigh much. I had them on my shoulder. I carry them still. At night in Vietnam, we formed a perimeter, dug our foxholes in a circle, and the safest place was inside that perimeter. And today, the perimeter is the reunions of combat veterans, wherever. Some of them are division reunions or battalion reunions, or a gathering like this one in Maryland. It's safe in that perimeter too. It's the one place you can find people who will listen to you, people that you can talk to, and I recommend you come and wear your ears, wear your tongue. Be prepared to talk, be prepared to listen, be prepared to heal. And God bless you.
Thank you, Joe Galloway, for being so open and the sharing of surely what is one of the most powerful stories of brotherhood and love during the Vietnam conflict. Before we end, I would like to introduce to you Brigadier General Ed Nolly, a Vietnam-era veteran and Gilchrist's first chair of the Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day celebration. He has an important message he would like to share with you.
Thank you, Colonel Ratliff. I've had the honor of participating in the Gilchrist We Honor Veterans program since its inception in 2012. Our committed team of veteran volunteers and volunteer family members work hard to support those who have served as those veterans age and approach end of life. We have honored, celebrated, and thanked thousands of veterans and their families through tributes in their homes, nursing facilities, and residential care communities. Also, we strive each year to make Veterans Day a little more special for our veterans and their families as we work to remember and thank them. An annual highlight has become this event, this Welcome Home event for our Vietnam veterans and their families, attended by hundreds of veterans each year. Many Vietnam veterans return home never having been welcomed or having experienced the feeling of a warm embrace from a fellow American. We have become family to many veterans who previously had no family. We have heard stories from World War II, Korean, and Vietnam warriors that have never been told before. We have developed deep and lasting friendships with our fellow veterans, as we know there is no bond quite like the one that we have with each other. We also help our veterans to die with dignity and at peace. I have found it quite rewarding to give something back in this very special way. Across our country, for every volunteer committed to serving veterans in palliative and hospice care, there are thousands of veterans who are sick, alone, and scared. They have never been honored, they've never been thanked, and they have never been welcomed home. Many of them feel as if no one cares. They have served their country with honor, and now they need their country to serve them. To my fellow veterans, join us in this most rewarding endeavor and get involved. Sign up to serve again. If you live in Baltimore or the surrounding counties, please join me on the Gilchrist We Honor Veterans team and help us to honor, thank, and remember the thousands of veterans and their families that we care for each year. To get started, please go to gilchristcares.org. That's gilchristcares.org. If you live in other areas, I encourage you to contact your local hospice organization or the VA and let them know that you want to help. There are so many ways we can give back and make a difference in the life of another veteran. It is impossible to adequately thank you, our veterans, for your service. But I will close with a big thank you and a welcome home.
Thank you, General Nolly. Finally, I would like to thank Gilchrist for hosting this very special event. Their commitment to Vietnam veterans and all veterans is evident each and every day by their compassion, their care, and the respect that they show those who have served in our communities. If you live in Maryland, we look forward to seeing you again next year at our 4th annual Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day celebration in March 2022. I will end today's program with these simple words, words that we can never say enough. Welcome home. Welcome home. Welcome home. We appreciate you. Thank you, and welcome home.
I need a heavenly touch, 'cause I'll be backsliding. I need a little guiding for my soul. Only heaven knows, 'cause I just need a helping hand. It's gonna help me stand. It's gonna help me stand. 'Cause I just need a helping hand. It's gonna help me stand. It's gonna help me stand. Every now and then I get a feeling in my bones that I'm just wandering on my own. So I hit my knees and I'm crying out, please, oh Lord, won't you bring me back home? Yeah. It's gonna help me stand. 'Cause I just